Maybe let me ask you a question. We started with the governance problems in Africa, in Kenya, and the corruption and all that. I remember when we were doing our bachelors, like international relations and diplomacy, there's this thought. I remember even asking one of our lecturers at the time. There was this argument being made, of course, with South Africa, apartheid and all that. Mm-hmm. It was horrible, definitely. But a comparison was being made at the time about infrastructure and the way they are much ahead in pretty much the entire continent of Africa. Mm-hmm. Despite all the problems they're having right now, load shedding and all that, the infrastructure. And the argument was being made that it's crazy, like when I think about it now, that maybe many African countries received independence too early or flag independence. Mm-hmm. And that if it had delayed for, let's say, 10 or 20 years, maybe like a lot of infrastructure would have been built. And I wanted to tie that particular argument with something that happened recently. I don't know, I mean, you're well versed with the Iraq war and all that. Do you remember Blackwater?
Yeah.
The PMCs. So like their founder, Erik Prince, he was on a podcast, I think, earlier this week. You've seen the clip?
Yes.
And he was talking about recolonizing Africa.
Putting back imperial hats on.
Yeah.
Yes.
It ultimately comes down to a contest of what is governance. Who is governed? Which countries are governed well? And if so many of these countries around the world are incapable of governing themselves, then it's time for us to just put the imperial hat back on to say, we're going to govern those countries if you're incapable of governing yourselves, because enough is enough. We're done being invaded.
Because our own national security risk is at stake.
Exactly.
National security interests are at stake.
You can say that about pretty much all of Africa. They're incapable of governing themselves and benefiting their citizens because the governments there are all about looting and pillaging and lining their pockets and going shopping in Paris instead of actually making their country a better
People on the left are going to watch this. They're going to say, wait a minute, Erik Prince is talking about being a colonialist again.
Absolutely. Yes. Enough. Because if you go to these countries and you see how they suffer under absolutely corrupt, made-up governments that are just criminal syndicates, the people of Africa, the people of Latin America, a lot of them deserve better. Now, the countries that cannot fix themselves, particularly in Africa, the worst, it's time to think about other governance options because they are clearly not capable of self-governance.
Even though such kind of views are completely reprehensible, like anybody listens to them, any black person, you're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But don't you think that still, because of so much dysfunction in many African countries, there are some people who might listen to that guy and they'll be like, I agree with him.
Yeah.
60 years down the line, most African leaders, like, nothing has been done. Exactly. Sometimes comparison, of course, a thief of joy and all that, Teddy Roosevelt. But sometimes you look at it and, of course, countries like Kenya, you hear, if you compare with so many countries in Africa, like Kenya is seen to be really ahead.
There's a lady.
There are countries, let's say, in the Sahel, like they are really, really badly off.
There's a lady who, I've forgotten her name, but on TikTok, she also has a YouTube video. Mm-hmm. She basically was touring around West Africa and Central Africa with her motorbike.
Itchy Boots.
Yes.
I've been watching her episodes. I mean, they're interesting.
Man, I saw her clip.
For Nigeria?
Not even Nigeria, Togo.
Uh-huh.
I was like, my God, this place is poor.
Yeah, I mean, and I know a lot of countries, even in the Sahel, in Mali, Niger, like they are really badly. And those are some of the countries that are having all these coup epidemic.
Note that a lot of them are Francophone countries.
Francophone countries, exactly. So, of course, there's that link with France and the current backlash you're seeing against France. But, of course, like even the Nigerian episode, it went viral because the two cops. Yeah, but what I found interesting also, like I was talking with a friend of mine, he's still in Osnabrück. He's a Nigerian. He's a Yoruba. He's called Benson Dukun. And I was telling him, and also like with my Ghanaian friend in Australia, he's doing his PhD. He's been doing it in Hong Kong, but he's doing like a semester or something, a fellowship in Canberra. And I was just like, yeah, one thing I noticed from those videos, especially the one where she was coming, I think from the Benin border into going to Abuja, and the roadblocks. I don't know if you saw that episode.
Yes. I remember I
and
was
the
reading one of the
roadblocks were, and she was passing and she was even counting, and you have like, and some are by military, some are by villagers, some by the local police,
sometimes not even
with the tires in between the roads. Yeah. And I was like, I've always heard about corruption in Nigeria, and sometimes here in Kenya we complain about corruption, but I was like, man, this is a different level.
Yeah.
And so I was asking my friend Benson, and he was like, yeah, I mean, Nigeria, like there are parts of the country where you're just like, it's an entirely different level.
this one? Yep. It's again like every kilometer there's a place like this. Every kilometer.
And so, coming to that aspect, some of these people who say like 60 years is enough at least to get some basics right. And if you go to some of those countries and they're that worse off, if somebody says, if Erik Prince makes those controversial statements and say we need to recolonize Africa. I mean, some people have already been blaming the Chinese and all that. PLO Lumumba, there's a speech I think he made a year, 2-3 years ago, that if African leaders are not careful, Africa will be recolonized in the next 25 years. And he was, of course, I think, trying to bring that angle about China, debt trap diplomacy, which, of course, a lot of people now say was a myth. It was mostly a myth, actually, if you look at it. But that aspect of so many countries not even having the basics right. And then you're like, if somebody says, let's recolonize them. I'm afraid there are so many people on the African continent who might agree with Erik Prince, even though they might be agreeing for different reasons.
You see, those people need to ask themselves, even if they do recolonize us and they build all of this infrastructure, who said that you'll enjoy it? Apartheid South Africa is quite obvious. It was quite clear that the infrastructure was for the whites.
For the whites.
Yeah, blacks were put in ghettos. The only way you could enjoy white infrastructure is if you're working for the whites. Yeah, you come here, you work, evening, go back to your ghetto. So,
but I mean, middle-class South Africans today, like, they're doing pretty well. They will say, like, they're enjoying the infrastructure.
They're doing quite well, but...
And other middle-class Africans who are migrating to South Africa because of the better jobs, and then, of course, it always brings out the backlash with xenophobia and all that.
Yeah, but you see, South Africans, when the apartheid ended and the Truth and Reconciliation Council came along... Commission, sorry. They made quite a big mistake where, you see, it's not enough that someone tells you sorry. They also have to make it right. If I take $1,000 from you, you don't take... Yes, I should apologize, but it doesn't end up just saying sorry. I need to give you the $1,000 back.
Repair.
Yeah, exactly.
They call it repair.
That's the only way we can actually move forward. And black South Africans never got that experience. They were told sorry, but that was the end of that. The political power was given to the Africans, but the capital remained with the whites. And truly what runs a country is capital. The land, a lot of it still remained with the whites, at least not just the arid land, the land that also held the industries, the steel industries and all of that. So what I think is when people do say that, when this guy says that he'd like to recolonize Africa,
Erik Prince.
I personally think that's an evil thing to think. And I think the Africans I understand that those Africans who are okay with it, of course you've suffered in Africa. Africa is tough. Kenya is tough.
Yeah, it's tough.
And a lot of people you'll find who are okay with it are people who...
Kenya, I don't know, South Africa, maybe even Nigeria. Some of these countries which are relatively doing much better. I mean, even Ghana, even though, of course, with the debt problems and inflation and all that at the moment. But yeah, I mean, there are some countries there where, like, if you look at the infrastructure, the roads...
It's better off.
We are way better. We are way better. And so if you look at those countries, especially in the Sahel, for me, like... Some of them, Central African Republic, etc., with the wars going on and conflict, never-ending conflicts, let's say in Eastern DRC. I mean, for those people, they'll be just like...
Yeah, why not?
If it brings like some stability, and some basics and all that, like why not? And of course, I mean, Erik Prince is linking it to immigration. And of course, you know, just in the West at the moment, immigration is like a hot topic.
Yeah, but
still hot. And for them, of course, they're doing it for their reasons. They're like, but you guys are invading our countries and all this and all that.
The immigration problems are a product of capitalism. Because these illegal immigrants, the people who have the incentive to hire them, are the capitalists, the people who own production. Because if I can hire this person who's undocumented, give them less money for the same, essentially even more labor than usual, the government will essentially, they won't have a problem turning a blind eye to the illegal immigration, because remember, the government, American government, it's not even a government. It's just, they're basically the whatevers.
A corporation.
They're a corporation. Yeah. They're not even a government. Because normally governments tell corporations what to do, but in America, it's the opposite. So even the immigration issue, it's an issue with capitalism.